Oh, we're recording. Hi, I'm Joanna.
Hi, I'm Charlie, one of the staff psychologists and the outreach coordinator at CAPS.
Oh, yeah, and I'm a clinical social worker and one of the therapists and multicultural coordinator at CAPS.
Yes, exciting role. You do a lot.
For sure, for sure. So today we are going to be talking about the challenges of social distancing while living on your own, which
Yes.
many folks I'm sure can relate to. Um, so we're going to kind of talk about some strategies to manage kind of anxiety or uncertainty while living alone, and then how to use this time for kind of like helpful, fruitful self-reflection, things like that. Um, Anything to add to that, Charlie?
No, I think you did a really good job of just kind of outlining what we're going to be doing. We're going to be having a mix of the conversational as well as providing a bit of psychoeducation, and also at the end we'll talk a bit about the resources that CAPS has for students at this time, and also for staff and faculty too, because everything that we have on our website is available to the entire campus community.
For sure. One thing before we get started, this workshop will kind of ask you to reflect on some things and also practice. So I would recommend grab something to write with and a piece of paper if you have one handy, because we're going to ask you some questions and allow for some time for some self-reflection. All right, shall I pull up the PowerPoint?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get started.
My screen. All right. So, like we said, we're talking about social connection and living on your own. Obviously, the way that looks is totally different in the era of COVID-19 with social distancing. Living on your own, I can say from personal experience, it's very different now, because before it's like you can go out with friends after work, and you go to work and you interact with multiple people. And at least for us, we're like working from home, and some of you guys might be studying from home or spending a lot more time on your own. And how do you kind of navigate that? So that's going to be the topic of this conversation today.
Yeah, and something else that, again, from my own personal experience living by myself, that a lot of the emotions that we experience and some of the same concerns and struggles, that our students experience, we're also experiencing that ourselves, and I think it makes it easier in that way to be able to relate a lot of those same feelings of anxiety, loneliness linked to isolation, a lot of different challenges that are coming up during this time. And it's not just for the people we work with, that's also us as therapists too.
Absolutely. So maybe to get started, asking the question for folks who live alone, or maybe folks who've even just lived alone in the past, what is your favorite part about living alone, and what is the most challenging? So maybe trying to think to yourself, maybe starting with what is most challenging about living alone. Um, for me, I know that it's different, right? Because I'm more of an introvert anyway, so I can tolerate more time alone than a lot of the more extroverted people I know. Um, but yeah, there can definitely be a sense of loneliness when you kind of isolate or withdraw a little bit too much. And I think for most of us, we are having to do that to an extent that we're not used to. So I think there's a stigma in our culture about like naming loneliness as an emotion that you feel and go through. But whether you have a huge family, whether you have a partner, whether you don't, I think all of us to an extent experience loneliness. And I think that becomes that much more acute and kind of obvious when you're living alone. You have to kind of deal with that sense of like isolation a bit more. So I would say for me, that's the most challenging part. I don't know, Charlie, if you have an answer to that.
Yeah, I think for me, what I've noticed as the most challenging is I'm similar to Joanna in the sense that I'm slightly more introverted, so I'm fine fine with the time to be by myself and being able to spend that and reflect. But I am close to my family, and a lot of my family members live pretty close to me, and so you know, celebrating the holiday, celebrating Passover, and knowing that they're so close, yet we had to do it over Zoom. That was really challenging because it disrupted a tradition of having the Seder in person, right? And so it
Really?
really was a big change, and it was really the first time since since quarantine started that I did really notice a sense of loneliness that I didn't necessarily experience before, especially when people are so close and yet they feel so far away. And I think that that's also an experience. I know, at least for me, that a lot of the clients and students I've worked with have talked about, like the holidays being particularly hard, or navigating just the time being spent by themselves, especially if they tend to lean more towards extroversion.
Absolutely, totally. Yeah, I think anyone experiencing those times of celebration, which, for me, I can relate. I had a birthday in April, and that was strange. And, a lot of people are graduating or celebrating numerous types of things, holidays, Passover, Easter, and all of those kind of had to shift in terms of how we celebrate them. So that's a big change as well. What about your favorite part of living alone, or like the nicest part about it?
Hmm. Does anyone want to chime in the chat box, or do we want to start our own conversation and folks
Oh,
will
sorry.
join in?
I'm not
Oh,
really good at PowerPoint. Yeah, please
yeah.
add your comments in the chat. What's your favorite part of living alone? So one comment, somebody said, the most challenging part is feeling like my digital interactions with my friends isn't enough. Totally hear that. Like, of course, it's nice to still have the opportunity to connect digitally, but it's just really not the same as like being in a room with somebody. And then this person also said, most favorite is just having my own space, which I totally can feel that as well. That's a really good point. For me, I think my favorite part would be I really enjoy just like putting on music and like dancing and cleaning and like feeling like I can be ridiculous and nobody's watching me, or like being able to play my guitar and not have to like bother anyone I'm living with. Those are my two favorites. And also
Joanna,
like, my
yeah.
cats.
Joanna, that reminds me, when you were talking about dancing, you were the one that let me know about Dance Church, right? And
Yeah, dance
yes,
church.
do we want to talk about Dance Church? Because I know I've done it twice so far, and it's extremely fun. So if anyone likes to dance or just wants to be able to move their body and you know
I'm so glad that
dance
you brought
around,
that up. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
dance
dance,
church, it's online. It's a free kind of dance workout that involves a lot of just freestyle dance. So it's super fun. You don't even really feel like you're working out, but you're still moving your body and having fun. I think it's Wednesday evenings at 8 Eastern time, and Sundays, I want to say maybe like noon or 1 Eastern time. But if you go to go.dancechurch.com, it's free and you can get all the info there. Charlie and I have both done it, and we can both attest it is super fun, and you can look as ridiculous as you want when you live alone.
and we've got a chat. So Jessica shares missing physical contact, and yes, even introverts need hugs. And I think you're spot on, Jessica, about the importance of connection via physicality, and that type of intimacy is still so important, and we need that closeness.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
All right, so moving forward to coping with uncertainty. Here we go. So we wanted to kind of go over some coping skills that you can use to manage fear and uncertainty. I think that this is even more important if you live alone because you don't have people right there with you to kind of talk things out with. And no matter who you are, I think it's fair to say, like, I mean, you can never say all, but like a vast majority of us are feeling some type of anxiety right now that is just like based on real events that could go bad that we just don't know how it's going to turn out, right? And I think it's important to normalize that, right? Like that anxiety isn't just something that some people experience, and there's not something wrong with you if you're feeling anxious a lot. That totally makes sense given the uncertainty of the times we're in. So, what are some ways in which we can work with that anxiety and honor it and also manage it so that it can kind of not interfere too much with our sense of well-being?
Right. And it's also, I think, really important to know this is definitely not an exhaustive list, right? There are so many different ways that we can cope, but this was, kind of these were the ideas that Joanna and I were brainstorming because they're active ways of coping. They help you connect to your body, to your environment, which ultimately is going to aid in increased mindfulness and connection. So this is why we incorporated the strategies that we included on the slide.
Totally. And I think it's also important to say that this is in no way telling people that you should just have to like go it alone when it comes to managing difficult emotions and anxiety. If things are really hard for you right now, I think it's also important to like drive the point home that asking for help is sometimes the best thing you can do and sometimes the strongest thing you can do, whether that means finding a therapist, hitting up CAPS, or just speaking to your support system about the hard time you're going through. We shouldn't have to go through everything alone. And even if you live alone, that doesn't mean you have to completely try to weather this storm all by yourself. But at the same time, it can be helpful to have some tools for you to manage some of your anxiety as well. So kind of balancing, how do I take care of myself, but also knowing it's okay to ask for help. Mm-hmm. So a couple of these strategies are good for kind of just regulating your body's response to anxiety. Usually anxiety can cause us to have an increased heart rate or breathe really fast, which kind of just builds on itself. A lot of times anxiety can affect us really physically, right? It can because what happens is all the blood rushes to your vital organs. So rushes out of your stomach, and then you have digestive issues and your
headaches
get numb, and I mean, people who've experienced panic or anxiety know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So how can you then re-regulate the body to kind of calm down and start to recenter if you're not in immediate danger? One proven method is the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Sorry, Charlie, did you want to add?
Oh, no, I was just going to say something that I always like to add, especially with thinking about our body's reactions to anxiety and fear, is that if that becomes chronic, over time it can start to influence and impact in a negative way our immune system, because our body is constantly in alarm mode, and it depletes so much of our resources that it becomes more challenging for our body to fight off infections, even just a common cold. So sometimes you might see an individual with chronic levels of anxiety and stress and fear complain of or report being sick more often. So I always just like to add that in, that it impacts us in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a holistic process to how anxiety can affect you. But then also our first 3 skills that we're talking about are mindfulness-based skills, and mindfulness is also shown to improve your immune system, improve your physical health. So that's one way to kind of maybe take a preventive measure to stay healthy, is even practicing mindfulness. So the first mindfulness technique is called 4-7-8 breathing. So the way that works is pretty simple. You just breathe in for 4 counts, hold your breath for 7 counts, and then breathe out for 8 counts. And it might take you a couple of cycles to get really into that. Also, if you're a person that has any breathing issues, have trouble holding your breath, you could do breathe in for 4, out for 4, breathe in for 4, out for 8, some sort of variation. So feel free to kind of make it your own. The 4-7-8 breathing can be really effective. So yeah, again, in for 4. Why don't we just try it? Why don't we just try it?
Sure. I'd love to do that.
Yeah. So maybe sitting up kind of straight. Let's all kind of get ready to inhale. So we're going to inhale now through the nose. 2, 3, 4, and then hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Even just setting a timer and doing that for like 3 minutes can totally like calm down the body. So it's a nice one to just have in your back pocket. The next strategy is called progressive muscle relaxation. And that is a skill that involves tensing and relaxing different muscle groups. So the point is to kind of intentionally bring tension to the body, and then so breathing in and tensing up, for example, making fists and tensing your arms, and then breathe out, relax, and let them drop, and then noticing how different it feels to have a relaxed, your muscles relax. So you can do that with your arms, you can do it with your facial muscles, you can do it with your chest, legs, abs, feet, everything. And then at the end, you can even like tense the whole body all at once and then relax. And it can kind of just relax the body. I also wanted to talk about grounding. Grounding exercises, it's a broad term for anything that engages the 5 senses to bring you back to the present moment. So any sensory experience. I also put bonus if done outdoors. So on a day like today, even if you just go outside and feel the rain on your face and just kind of notice the temperature and the sensation of like being out in the rain for even a few moments, that can be a grounding exercise. And Charlie, I know you like grounding too. I don't know if you want to.
Yes. Yeah, I was thinking that it's building on my workshop that I gave that was last week. So thinking about different ways to approach grounding, sensory grounding. We also have cognitive grounding, noticing what is taking place around you, what's in your environment. I kind of call it like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 game. So we could even do it really briefly right now. Noticing.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So you're going to start by noticing 5 things that you see and identifying those in as much description as you can. If you did this with me last week, you don't have to do it again, but it's fun, so you can do it if you want. Once you've identified 5 things that you see, we'll move on to 4 things that you hear.
Yeah, so feel free to pop those in the chat. You have 5 things that you can see right now.
And then when you've identified those, we'll think of 4 things that you can hear. And then try and notice 3 things that you feel that you can touch. Next, think about notice 2 smells, anything in your environment, maybe lotion, a candle. And last, something that you can taste if you have anything, or if there isn't anything immediate in your environment, maybe thinking about a taste that you really enjoy, something that's really soothing to you. So if you'd like to share either what you were able to notice around you or describe, what you observed, or just even your reactions, feel free to share in the chat box, and we'll read those off. But we can, if you want to keep going, Joanna, we can shift over to creative hobbies. I see your cat in the background. He's trying to ground too.
Yeah, he's grounded 24/7. That's all he knows how to do. I was just gonna say real quick that my favorite part of, I love that exercise. My favorite part is always the touch. Like I like to just kind of notice like how my clothing feels in the moment, or kind of the surface that I'm sitting on. I also have this notebook that has like sequins on it that you can just do this with, and it's like really grounding. So I actually did that while we were doing that exercise. So that's just one example. Anything that engages the senses is grounding. And the reason it's so effective, it gets you out of your head, out of thoughts of like what's going to happen in the future, thinking about the past, just being in the present moment and noticing like I'm safe, I'm here, I'm like grounded, right? So really good stuff.
Yes.
I also put creative hobbies on here because I think those can really be soothing. A lot of us maybe really enjoyed doing arts and crafts as children, and it can like even engage like your inner child, right? Bring out some coloring books or make a little collage, or play an instrument. Even baking and cooking can be a creative hobby, and I think creating something can really take a lot of your attention, so it kind of takes the attention away from the anxiety.
Yeah, and I think to build on that, I always like to talk about the difference between active and passive coping too, right? And there are times for each. Sometimes it can just feel really nice to just lie around, binge watch something on Netflix, right? But eventually utilizing more active forms of coping, whether that's grounding, going outside, something more engaging, is ultimately in the long run going to probably be more effective. But as we know, we have to find moderation, right? And all of us like those times where we can just lie around and not have to think. But also recognizing when we can find that balance too.
That's such a good point. I think a good way to think about it is like just matching the intensity of the emotion you're trying to cope with. For example, if your anxiety is at like a 3 or a 4 out of 10, maybe sitting and watching Netflix will work for you. But if you're like really feeling it and it's at like a 7 or even like an 8 or 9, I would choose something more active, whether that's like doing a workout or, a hobby where you're like having to use your hands and like really do something, because when the anxiety is that high, you're really not going to be able to touch it with just a passive activity. So that's a really good point. I also wanted us to talk about connecting with friends and loved ones, because this is obviously how we cope. Most of us are pretty social creatures to some extent, even us introverts. So how do we maintain those connections in this time? Obviously, like one of our participants already said, it can be challenging because it's just not the same as spending time with people physically. But what are ways in which we can connect with friends and loved ones during this time? So for me, I really like the app Marco Polo.
Me too.
I think a ton of people have downloaded it recently, but my friends and I have a group chat going, and you just send little videos of yourself and you kind of talk to each other and send them throughout the day. So I have a group of 5 friends. where we like have an ongoing Marco Polo, and we've had this going for like 2 months now. So, and it's just like each day we can just like look at our little Marco Polo feed. Um, and it's a little bit more active than just like looking at social media, right? Because you're actually talking to people.
Right. I also think that even just using Zoom, even though probably with work and this has become such a significant way of interacting that at times it might feel kind of like you're zoomed out, right? But it is a really helpful way to be able to have that connection. I read somewhere actually that in December they had about 10 million people using Zoom regularly. Since the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, I think their usage has increased to like 200 million people are
Wow.
using Zoom as of like the end of March. So you can see obviously right now how much people are relying on video conference, and it's as much as we like to take a break from technology too, it's helpful to know it's there.
Absolutely. Yeah, it can be really helpful to know that that's an option to connect, even just doing like a video call. Um, I know for me, like I've actually reconnected with a lot of people I almost like lost touch with before, just because there's like maybe a little bit more time to reach out. And, it's as easy to talk to somebody who lives in across the country as it is somebody who lives in your neighborhood now, because it's all through digital formats. So it's a good opportunity maybe to reconnect with somebody who you've lost touch with, by using those platforms.
Yeah.
All right, I have a few more ideas. Ooh, how do you go back? Here we go. So a couple more ideas to think about for coping with fear and uncertainty. Acts of service is really helpful. So contributing to others can be a good way to change how you feel about yourself and how you feel about kind of the world, right? To just notice the goodness in others and in yourself by engaging in acts of service.
And that
It can,
could,
yeah,
oh,
it can be really small. Like I was gonna say, you could just go on a GoFundMe and maybe just do a random like look at somebody's what like GoFundMe request and give $5 if you have the ability to do that. Is one example. Like picking up trash in your neighborhood, obviously like with gloves safely and using hygiene practices, things of that nature, and finding opportunities in your community to give back, I think can be a really helpful thing to do, not just for your community, but for yourself.
mhm. Do we want to move on to acquiring new skills, knowledge? We can talk about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So this has been, I would say that this is the one that I've tried to utilize the most, as someone who loves art and not necessarily creating art, but learning about art, having worked in museums. I've really loved that a lot of famous museums during this time have made their collections available online, and you can go through and basically tour the entire museum. And so learning more about art. I know there are also a lot of just natural history museums around the world that have opened up their collections online. And sometimes just being able to learn from the comfort of your own home, and that could again kind of be acquiring a new skill, learning a new recipe, learning to, as Joanna was saying, playing an instrument. So using this time to maybe broaden horizons and sort of looking into something that you hadn't thought of before, and utilizing this time in a productive way, and using this time in a way that feels enjoyable too, even though it's a really heavy situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. It makes you feel good about yourself when you're learning something new and doing something different. My cats are going crazy right now. I'm sorry. You guys probably can hear them like running around. But I was also going to say you can combine the two. Like, as Charlie already knows, I'm a musician, kind of part time. And I have a lot of friends who do music and gigs full time, and they're really struggling right now because you can't do gigs right now. So I know a lot of people who are offering music lessons. So I decided, since I'm a self-taught guitar player, to take guitar lessons on Zoom. And I started doing that last week. And it's a good way to kind of support one of my friends who also is trying to like find a new way to make a living and also learn a new skill, or I guess like expand a current skill. So that was one example I just wanted to share. How to use that one. The next idea, home improvement and organizing, finding ways to really kind of improve or pay attention to your living space, right? If you're living by yourself, you're maybe spending a lot more time than you're used to in your place, right? I know for myself, it's like, wow, I'm home a lot more than I usually am. So how can you make your home a space that feels really like comfortable for you, that feels relaxing, that feels homey? If you've had projects you've wanted to do and put off, this is a good time to get to those, spring cleaning, home improvement, just organization, maybe giving away, donating clothes that you don't use anymore. Just kind of, that can, just like making your space a place that you feel comfortable, I think is a good kind of thing to focus on, especially now.
And I think maybe even linking home improvement as well, and as well as even thinking about using the time for journaling and self-reflection, I sort of think of the importance of structure too, and how both of these different ways of coping can really help to instill a sense of structure in the day. If you are working on organizing or cleaning your apartment, setting aside an hour in the morning, depending on if you're a morning or a night person. I know I'm a night owl, so I would be more prone to doing those things in the evening. But also, thinking about when is the best time of day to journal? When do I want to incorporate that into my routine? When can I be at my most reflective and really have that be a powerful way of coping?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I wanted to have us talk about journaling and self-reflection. Obviously, this can be a really nice time to like get in touch with yourself and do some self-reflection. So we actually posed some reflection questions for each day. Charlie, did you want to talk about those?
Sure. We also have one of our participants sharing in Iceland. The Forestry Service has recommended that if you can't hug a person, go hug a tree. And I can recommend it. They don't hug back, but it still feels great. I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing this creative idea. I think that being outdoors right now, something that I think might have gotten lost in the bigger sense of quarantine and staying home, is that you can't leave your house at all, but you can go outside, and people,
Yeah.
you need to be able to get outside, get fresh air, go for a walk, just practice healthy physical distancing and keeping yourself and others healthy. But this idea is fantastic. We have all of this nature around us, and to be able to connect to it is a really important part of making sure that we're keeping our own mental and emotional health at a good place.
Mm-hmm. Make sure you ask the tree though. Ask the tree before you hug it, because some trees just may not be in the mood for a hug, and you can feel it. You can feel it when you find the right tree.
Yeah. So Joanna and I put together some reflection questions, and now that I look at this list, we sort of talked about the first two earlier on. No, that's okay. This is good. Thinking about what has been your favorite part of being on your own, a big challenge that you faced, but also thinking about ways that you've stayed connected to others, and maybe even identifying one or two of the different coping skills discussed that you could see yourself practicing in the coming days, and not feeling like you have to try everything, but really honing in on one or two that feel doable to you, and that you can really incorporate into a routine and help give your day structure I find that that can also be really difficult for people right now, especially if you were going to work and you had a schedule. We're fortunate enough, at least at this time, to be able to work from home, and so there's still more of a schedule. But it can also be really hard to set that boundary, because work and home have kind of collided in a way that maybe they haven't before. So thinking about how can I incorporate more strategies to enhance my own well-being, as well as giving myself healthy boundaries to separate from from work and taking care of myself. And the last reflection question we came up with was, in what ways have you grown since quarantine began? This has been an event that has shaped really our world, and it's certainly shaped the trajectory of this year so far. I don't think any of us expected to have the first part of 2020 dominated by a pandemic, but this is where we are. And as Joanna loves to talk about, radical acceptance, right? There is a big part of that in that applies to this situation. But reflecting again, thinking about how you've grown since quarantine began.
Yeah.
No, Jen.
I just wanted to say about radical acceptance. You probably can't read it from here, but I put the serenity prayer up on my window to look at every day, which is, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. And that has been a very just grounding statement for me to remind myself of. And I think just having the ability to ask yourself, okay, am I ruminating about how coronavirus is spreading all over the world? Do I really have in this moment control over that? Probably not. What are things I can control? How can I check in on my loved ones? How can I take care of myself today? Putting your focus on things that you really can influence and change and have some agency about, I think is a really, at least for me, that's one way I've grown, is just really being able to, and some days I'm better at it than others, but really being able to sometimes step back and say okay, this isn't for me to really control right now. I don't have the ability to. So may I just have the serenity to accept that this is the way things are today.
Right. So do we want to conclude and look at some of the resources?
Yeah.
Right. So we know.
Yeah, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, right now we know that CAPS, we are open. We have a variety of resources available to the entire campus community. We have our after hours crisis line that you can call at any time after typical 5 p.m. End time. Our hours are 8 to 5. I've also included hyperlinks to our remote workshops, and Fridays, all of the workshops for the week are posted on our webpage, and you can watch them whenever you have time if you can't tune into them live. And we've also put together a really comprehensive resource page. There's so many different things right now that people can do to help enhance their mental health. Different resources in the community, also even on campus, including links to maybe different books in the library, different mindfulness videos, relaxation exercises. Just trying to put together everything that we can to help serve all of you.
Mm-hmm.
Joanna, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, that's all really great. Just to think about are just the resources available to folks in our community right now, including just the opportunity to reach out to CAPS if you are needing some more support or individual services. We're still here for you and able to support you remotely. So please email us at the email listed on this slide. And really just I wanted to drive that point home that we are we really want you to think about both how can I take care of myself and cope with these things, and how can I challenge myself to reach out for support and ask for help, because sometimes that's a really hard thing to do. We want to believe that we can just manage things on our own and power through, and we don't want to, and we have this sense that we're bothering people if we reach out and ask for help. But really, like, if you think about it, I think most of us would want our loved ones to tell us if they were struggling. So really viewing yourself that way, like you're worth getting help, and it's okay to not be okay right now. So we're here to support you, and even if you don't reach out to us, we hope you can reach out to somebody if you're struggling right now.
Yeah. I think that we have come to the end of our presentation, our workshop today. Unless you have anything to add, I don't think I do, Joanna.
I don't think so, but yeah, feel free to ask any questions if anybody has any, or again, email us for more information. We'll be happy to talk to you more.
Yes. Thank you so much for attending our workshop today, and we hope that you stay healthy and stay well during this time. And don't forget that we are here for you at CAPS.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.